made a sickening crunch as they sliced through Madison Hayes' long auburn hair, chunks falling to the classroom floor while 23 students watched in stunned silence. What started as a cruel prank by the school's golden boy quarterback would unleash a chain of events that would destroy careers, expose a decade-old scandal, and send 3 people to prison. They thought she was just another scholarship kid they could humiliate without consequences. They had no idea Madison Hayes was about to teach them the most expensive lesson of their lives. Madison Hayes had always known Westfield Academy operated by different rules than the rest of the world. The elite private school tucked away in Connecticut's wealthiest district was a universe where last names mattered more than SAT scores, where parking lots gleamed with Ferraris and Bentleys, and where a single donation could erase any transgression. She'd earned her spot through pure academic brilliance. A full scholarship that covered the $85,000 annual tuition, but couldn't buy her acceptance among the legacy students who'd been groomed for Westfield since birth. At 17, Madison possessed the kind of sharp intelligence that made teachers uncomfortable and classmates resentful. Her essays dissected societal inequalities with surgical precision. Her debate performances left open and stammering. Her 4.0 GPA street ood as an unassailable monument to merit in a place that usually rewarded connections over competence. And that excellence, that refusal to diminish herself for others' comfort, had painted a target on her back from day one. The morning of the 15th of October began like any other. Madison arrived at 7:30 a.m., an hour before most students, to use the library's resources her apartment's cramped study corner couldn't provide. She'd been preparing for the National Merit Scholarship Competition, the kind of achievement that could secure her future beyond Westfield's ivory towers. Her hair, which fell past her shoulders in carefully maintained waves, was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She'd inherited the auburn color from her Irish grandmother, along with a spine made of steel and a tongue sharp enough to cut glass. By 10:45 a.m., she was sitting in advanced European history, front row center as always. When everything changed, Mr. Davidson was droning about the Treaty of Versailles when she felt the first tug on her ponytail. She ignored it, assuming someone had accidentally brushed against her while passing. The second tug was deliberate, followed by muffled laughter from the back of the room. Madison didn't turn around. She'd learned that acknowledging the harassment only encouraged it. Then she heard the metallic whisper of scissors opening. The sound triggered every alarm in her mind. But before she could react, before she could even turn her head, she felt the blade close around her hair. The cut wasn't clean or quick. It was jagged, deliberate, performed with a kind of malicious precision that spoke of premeditation. Chunks of auburn hair floated to the floor like autumn leaves, while the classroom erupted in gasps and nervous giggles. Madison's hand flew to the back of her head, fingers finding the ragged edges where her ponytail had been. She turned slowly, mechanically, to face her attacker. Trevor Sinclair stood behind her empty desk, a pair of fabric scissors in his manicured hand and a smirk playing on his lips that would cost his family more than they could imagine. The quarterback's blue eyes sparkled with the kind of cruelty that money had always protected, the kind of entitlement that assumed consequences were for other people. Behind Trevor stood his usual crew, Blake Morrison, whose father owned the largest pharmaceutical company in the Northeast, Emma Cartwright, heir to a fashion empire, and Derek Chen, son of a hedge fund billionaire. They formed a semicircle of privilege, their expressions ranging from shock to amusement to something darker that Madison recognized as anticipation. They were waiting for her to cry, to run, to give them the reaction they'd choreographed in their group chat the night before. Mr. Davidson, all 6 feet of academic mediocrity stuffed into a brown suit, finally noticed the disturbance. His eyes took in the scene: Madison's butchered hair, Trevor's scissors, the auburn evidence scattered across the floor, and made a calculation that would later feature prominently in a criminal investigation. He cleared his throat, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, and continued his lecture as if nothing had happened. As I was saying, the treaty's Article 231, commonly known as the War Guilt Clause. His words faded into white noise as Madison processed what had just occurred. Not the haircut itself. Hair grew back, and she'd never defined herself by her appearance. It was the synchronized nature of the attack. The way even peripheral students had shifted their desks to create better viewing angles. The way phones had appeared in hands just seconds before Trevor struck. This wasn't spontaneous cruelty. This was orchestrated humiliation. And Mr. Davidson's deliberate blindness confirmed what she'd suspected for 3 years. The rod at Westfield went all the way to the top. Madison stood slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. She didn't touch her hair again, didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her assess the damage. Instead, she walked to Mr. Davidson's desk, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. The teacher's hand trembled slightly as he continued writing on the board, his back turned in a cowardice, so complete it bordered on parody. "Mr. Davidson," Madison said, her voice carrying the kind of calm that preceded hurricanes, "I need to report an assault." The chalk in his hand snapped. He turned, his face already arranging itself into the expression of willful ignorance that had served him through 2 decades of enabling Westfield's worst impulses. "I'm sure whatever happened was just a misunderstanding. Miss Hayes, please return to your seat." "A misunderstanding," Madison repeated, each syllable precise as a scalpel. "Would you like me to collect my hair from the floor to help clarify that misunderstanding? Or should I leave it there as evidence for the police report I'll be filing?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Trevor's smirk faltered for the first time, a hairline crack in his armor of assumed immunity. Emma Cartwright's phone lowered slightly, her recording suddenly feeling less like entertainment and more like evidence. Blake Morrison took an unconscious step backward, the first rat sensing the ship might actually sink this time. "Mr. Davidson's face cycled through several shades of red before settling on a mottled purple that clashed with his tie. "Miss Hayes, I think you're overreacting. Boys will be boys. And I'm sure Trevor meant no real harm. Perhaps if you hadn't been so provocative in your academic performance, these tensions wouldn't arise." The words hung in the air like a confession. Several students gasped, recognizing that their teacher had just crossed a line from passive enabling to active victim blaming. Madison smiled then, a expression that would haunt Trevor Sinclair's dreams for years to come. It wasn't a smile of hurt or anger or even defiance. It was the smile of someone who'd just been handed exactly what they needed. "Provocative," she said, savoring the word. "My academic performance is provocative. I want to make sure I understand your position clearly. Mr. Davidson, you're stating, on record, in front of 23 witnesses, that my academic excellence provoked a physical assault, and that this assault is acceptable because, quote, boys will be boys. Is that correct?" The teacher's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. He looked to Trevor for help. A moment of naked desperation that revealed the true power dynamics at play. The quarterback's father donated 7 figures annually to Westfield's endowment. Madison's mother worked 2 jobs to cover what the scholarship didn't. In Mr. Davidson's moral calculus, the math was simple. "What I meant was," he began. But Madison cut him off. "I know exactly what you meant." She turned to address the class, her butchered hair creating a defiant halo in the morning light, streaming through the windows. "I want everyone here to remember this moment. Remember what you saw. Remember what you heard. Remember who stayed silent and who spoke up. Because I promise you, this isn't over." She gathered her books with methodical precision, refusing to rush, refusing to flee. As she reached the door, she paused and looked back at Trevor. He still held the scissors, his knuckles white around the handles, his blue eyes no longer sparkling with cruelty, but clouded with the first stirrings of genuine fear. "Your father's name is Richard Sinclair, correct?" Madison asked conversationally. "CEO of Sinclair Industries. Net worth approximately $2.3 billion. Westfield's biggest donor. I just want to make sure I have the right Richard Sinclair when this goes public." "You can't," Trevor started, his voice cracking. "Can't what?" Madison tilted her head, studying him like a specimen. "Can't seek justice? Can't demand consequences? Can't refuse to be silenced by money and privilege? Watch me." She left the classroom with her head high, leaving behind 23 witnesses, 1 complicit teacher, and 4 perpetrators who had no idea they'd just lit a fuse that would blow their entire world apart. The security footage from the hallway would later show her walking calmly to the bathroom, where she'd stand before the mirror for exactly 90 seconds, examining the damage with clinical detachment. They'd cut at least 8 inches, leaving her with a ragged bob that looked like it had been styled by a vindictive toddler. But Madison didn't cry. She didn't scream. She pulled out her phone and made 3 calls that would set in motion a series of events that would make headlines across the country. The first was to her mother. The second was to a number she'd memorized but never used, a number given to her by someone who'd said to call if she ever needed help. The third was to a local news station, whose investigative reporter had been trying to crack Westfield's wall of silence for years. By the time she walked out of that bathroom, Madison Hayes had declared war on an institution that had protected predators and silenced victims for generations. She didn't know yet that Trevor's assault was part of a larger pattern, that Mr. Davidson's complicity ran deeper than simple cowardice, or that the rabbit hole she was about to expose went all the way to the district superintendent's office. She didn't know that within 6 months, 3 people would be in prison. Westfield Academy would be under federal investigation, and her story would inspire a nationwide movement against institutional protection of bullying. All she knew was that they'd touched her hair, her body, her person, without consent, and expected her poverty to purchase her silence. They'd weaponized her excellence against her, tried to cut her down to their size. Literally and figuratively. They'd mistaken her scholarship status for weakness, her work ethic for vulnerability, her integrity for something that could be bought or broken. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The war for Westfield's soul had begun with the snip of scissors, but it would end with the sound of handcuffs clicking shut, and Madison Hayes, the girl they tried to humiliate into submission, would be the one leading the charge. By noon, the video was everywhere. Emma Cartwright might have thought she was clever, posting the assault on her private Instagram story, but she'd forgotten that privacy was an illusion in the digital age. Someone, Madison never found out who, though she suspected it was Aisha Patel, the quiet girl who sat in the back corner and saw everything, had screen recorded the story before it expired. Within hours, it had spread beyond Westfield's insular bubble into the wider world, where Trevor's smirking face and Mr. Davidson's calculated indifference played on repeat for millions of strangers. Madison spent her lunch period in the principal's office, though office was a generous term for what looked more like a small museum dedicated to Westfield's glory days. Dr. Patricia Brennan sat behind a mahogany desk that cost more than most people's cars. Her perfectly manicured fingers steepled as she regarded Madison with the kind of concern that never quite reached her eyes. "This is certainly unfortunate, Dr. Brennan began, her voice modulated to convey sympathy without committing to action. "I understand you're upset about the incident in Mr. Davidson's class." "Assault," Madison corrected. "Not incident. Assault. And yes, I'm upset that a student felt comfortable attacking me with a weapon while a teacher watched and did nothing." Dr. Brennan's eye twitched at the word weapon, but her smile remained fixed. "Scissors are hardly a weapon. Miss Hayes, let's not be dramatic. Would you prefer I test that theory?" Madison asked. "I could borrow a pair from your desk and demonstrate their harmlessness on your hair. For educational purposes, of course." The principal's hand moved unconsciously to her own perfectly styled blonde bob. "That won't be necessary. I've spoken with Mr. Davidson, and he assures me this was simply a case of teenage hijinks that got out of hand." Teenage hijinks. Madison pulled out her phone, swiping to the video that was already accumulating millions of views. "This is what you call hijinks? A premeditated assault filmed for social media entertainment? You can't prove it was premeditated." "Actually, I can." Madison produced a stack of printed screenshots from her bag. "These are from a group chat called Westfield Royalty. Trevor, Blake, Emma, and Derek discussing their plan to, quote, put the scholarship bitch in her place. They debated between cutting my hair and destroying my laptop. They chose hair because, according to Blake, her computer probably has tracking software since she's poor." Dr. Brennan's face had gone pale beneath her foundation. She reached for the papers, but Madison pulled them back. "These are copies? The originals are with my attorney." "Your attorney?" The principal's voice climbed an octave. "Madison, surely we can resolve this internally without involving. The same way you resolved Ashley Chen's sexual assault claim internally? Or Marcus Washington's broken arm? Or the 37 other incidents over the past 5 years that were quietly buried in exchange for donations?" The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Brennan's mask finally slipped, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. "You have no idea what you're playing with, young lady. The families involved in this school have resources you can't imagine. They will destroy you." "They can try?" Madison stood, smoothing her uniform skirt with steady hands. "But first, they'll have to explain why their children felt entitled to assault a classmate on camera. They'll have to justify why a teacher openly endorsed that assault, and they'll have to account for every single incident you've covered up to protect your donors." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Dr. Brennan, you might want to check your email. The New York Times education reporter has some questions about Westfield's disciplinary statistics. Apparently, someone sent her a very interesting spreadsheet showing how punishment correlates with family income rather than offense severity." Madison left the principal's office to find the hallway unusually crowded. Word had spread that she'd not only survived the morning's attack but was fighting back. Students who'd never acknowledged her existence suddenly found reasons to linger near her locker. She ignored them all, focused on getting through the rest of the day with her dignity intact despite her butchered hair. But the universe wasn't done testing her yet. 7th period AP chemistry should have been a refuge. Science didn't care about social hierarchies or donation sizes, but when Madison walked into the lab, she found Trevor Sinclair sitting at her usual station, his football teammates flanking him like bodyguards. The message was clear: they own this space too. Mrs. Rodriguez, one of the few teachers Madison respected, looked between them with obvious discomfort. "Mr. Sinclair, that's Madison's assigned seat." "Oh, I'm sure she won't mind sharing," Trevor said, his voice dripping with false innocence. "After all, we're all friends here." "Right. Madison, The classroom held its breath. This was a test. Everyone knew it. Would Madison back down? Would she take another seat and let them claim this victory? Would she go running to the administration again? She did none of those things. Instead, Madison walked directly to the station, set her books down on the table with deliberate force, and looked Trevor in the eye. "You're in my seat? Make me move," he said, leaning back with practiced arrogance. Madison smiled. It was the same smile she'd worn in history class, the one that promised consequences. Gladly, she pulled out her phone and hit record, making sure the camera captured Trevor's face clearly. "For the record, this is Trevor Sinclair, who assaulted me this morning, now attempting to deny me access to my education by physically blocking my assigned seat in AP Chemistry. Mrs. Rodriguez, you're witnessing this, correct?" The teacher nodded reluctantly. "Yes, I am. And you've asked him to move?" "I have. And he's refused?" Trevor's confidence began to waver. "You can't just—" "Actually, I can. See, your little stunt this morning opened a beautiful door called legal documentation. Every interaction we have from now on is evidence, every word, every gesture, every pathetic attempt at intimidation." Madison kept recording, her voice steady and clear. "So please, continue refusing to move. The civil suit my attorney is preparing will appreciate the additional documentation of continued harassment." Blake Morrison tugged on Trevor's sleeve. "Dude, maybe we should." "Shut up," Trevor snapped, but his bravado was crumbling. The camera made him nervous. The mention of attorneys made him nervous. The way Madison stood there, unmoved and unafraid, despite her hacked hair and scholarship status, made him very nervous. "You have 10 seconds, Madison said pleasantly. "Then I call my attorney on speaker, so the whole class can hear him explain the legal definition of harassment and the specific statutes you're violating." 9, 8, 7. Trevor stood so abruptly he knocked over a beaker. It shattered on the floor, spreading glass across the tiles like glittering accusations. He stormed out with his teammates trailing behind, their retreat marked by the crunch of broken glass under expensive sneakers. Madison calmly took her seat and opened her textbook. Around her, the class remained frozen, processing what they just witnessed. The scholarship girl had won a round against Trevor Sinclair. It was like watching gravity reverse itself. Mrs. Rodriguez quietly swept up the broken glass, her hands shaking slightly. As she passed Madison's station, she whispered, "Be careful. These family don't play fair." "Neither do I," Madison whispered back. The rest of the class proceeded in tense normalcy, but Madison could feel the shift in the air. Lines were being drawn, sides were being chosen, and somewhere in Westfield's administrative offices, phones were ringing with angry parents demanding explanations for why their children were being persecuted by a scholarship student who didn't know her place. After school, Madison stood in the parking lot waiting for the public bus that marked her as definitively other among the luxury cars. Her phone buzzed with notifications. The video had gone viral. Messages of support mixed with threats. Interview requests from reporters who smelled blood in Westfield's pristine waters. She ignored them all, focused on the simple act of getting home, where she could process the day's events in peace. A car pulled up beside her, not the bus, but a black Tesla with tinted windows. The passenger window rolled down, revealing a woman Madison recognized but had never met. Catherine Morrison, Blake's mother and one of Westfield's most powerful board members. She was everything Madison's mother wasn't: polished, privileged, and utterly certain of her place at the top of the food chain. "Get in," Catherine said. It wasn't a request. Madison stayed where she was. "I'm good with the bus. Thanks. I'm trying to help you." "You stupid girl. Get in before someone sees us talking." Against her better judgment, Madison got in. The car smelled like expensive leather and subtle perfume. A world away from the diesel fumes of public transportation, Catherine pulled away from the curb, her manicured hands tight on the steering wheel. "You have no idea what you've started," Catherine said without preamble. "The video, the threats of lawsuits, the reporters sniffing around. Do you think you're the first student to challenge Westfield's power structure?" "I think I'm the first with evidence," Madison replied. Catherine laughed, a bitter sound that held no humor. "Evidence? You sweet, naive child. Do you know what happened to the last family that tried to expose Westfield's secrets? The Johnsons? 5 years ago. Their daughter was being systematically bullied. Much like you, they had evidence too. Videos, testimonias, documentation of administrative cover-ups." Madison's pulse quickened. She'd heard whispers about the Johnsons but never the full story. Within 6 months, Mr. Johnson lost his job due to restructuring. Mrs. Johnson's small business faced an IRS audit that found mysterious discrepancies. Their mortgage was called in early due to a clerical error. Their daughter's college applications were mysteriously lost or arrived with damaging additions. They left town broken, and silent. The car stopped at a red light. Catherine turned to look at Madison directly, her Botox-smooth face incapable of showing the full depth of emotion in her eyes. That's what happens when you fight these people. They don't just defeat you, they erase you. Why are you telling me this? Madison asked. Because unlike the Johnsons, you have something they didn't. Catherine reached into her purse and pulled out a flash drive. Insurance. Madison stared at the small device. What is this? 15 years of Westfield's dirty secrets. Every cover-up. Every bribe. Every crime hidden behind donation checks. Financial records. Email chains. Security footage that was supposed to be destroyed. Everything. Why would you give this to me? Catherine's mask finally cracked, revealing raw pain beneath. Because my son is becoming a monster. And I helped create him. Because I've watched this school destroy children for profit. And I've been complicit. Because my daughter... She stopped. Composed herself. My daughter tried to kill herself last year rather than face another day at Westfield. We covered it up. Of course. Sent her to a wellness retreat in Switzerland. But I know the truth. She pressed the flash drive into Madison's hand. Trevor Sinclair is the symptom, not the disease. If you're going to fight this, fight all of it. Burn it all down. This could destroy you too. Madison pointed out. I'm already destroyed. I've been dead inside for years. Playing my role. Protecting my family's interests. But you still have fire. Use it. The car pulled up to Madison's apartment complex, a modest building that looked even shabbier in contrast to the Tesla's luxury. As Madison opened the door, Catherine spoke one last time. They'll come at you hard now. Your mother's job. Your scholarship. Your future. Everything is at risk. But that flash drive contains enough evidence to put several people in prison, including my husband. Use it wisely. Madison stood on the sidewalk, watching the Tesla disappear into traffic. The flash drive felt impossibly heavy in her hand. Weighted with secrets that could topple dynasties, her phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. You should have taken another seat in chemistry. This isn't over. T. She screen-recorded the threat and added it to her growing file. Let them come. She had homework to do, and not the kind assigned in textbooks. Tonight, she would begin parsing through 15 years of corruption, building a case that would make the morning's haircutting incident look like a paper cut compared to the amputation she was about to perform on Westfield's rotten core. But first, she had to face her mother. The apartment smelled like the lavender candles her mother burned to mask the mustiness of old pipes and older dreams. Sarah Hayes sat at the kitchen table, still in her hospital, scrubs from her day shift, her face a map of exhaustion and worry. The local news played on their ancient television, Madison's butchered hair filling the screen in high definition. Baby, her mother said, and that single word carried years of fear, love, and bone-deep weariness. What have you done? Madison sat across from her mother, the flash drive hidden in her pocket, feeling like it might burn through the fabric. On the television, a reporter stood outside Westfield Academy, her voice grave as she described the shocking incident that has gone viral, raising questions about bullying and accountability at one of the state's most prestigious private schools. They cut my hair. Mom, Madison said quietly, in class. While the teacher watched, Sarah Hayes reached across the table, her calloused fingers, hands that had comforted countless patients, gently touching the ragged edges of her daughter's butchered hair. I can see that, baby. But what I'm seeing on the news, lawyers, investigations, reporters, Madison, these people have money, real money, the kind that makes problems disappear, like they made Ashley Chen disappear, or Marcus Washington, or Catherine Morrison's daughter. Madison pulled out the flash drive, setting it on the scratch table between them. I'm not disappearing, Mom, not this time. Her mother stared at the small device as if it were a live grenade. What is that? 15 years of evidence. Every crime Westfield Academy covered up. Every bribe. Every family they destroyed for challenging them. Madison met her mother's eyes. I'm going to expose all of it. Sarah's face cycled through emotions, pride, fear, anger, and finally, a resignation that hurt to witness. They'll come after my job. The hospital's biggest donor is Richard Sinclair. I know. Madison had done her research. Sinclair Industries had donated the cardiac wing. Mom, how many night shifts have you worked to keep me at that school? How many doubles? How many holidays? That's different. That was my choice. No, it wasn't. It was survival. Working yourself to death so I could have a chance at a better life. While kids like Trevor Sinclair get that life handed to them at birth, Madison's voice hardened. I'm done being grateful for scraps. I'm done pretending their charity makes us equals. They touched me. Mom, They put their hands on me and cut my body, and everyone just watched. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, then stood and walked to the window. Outside, their neighborhood showed its wear: graffitied walls, broken streetlights, the persistent soundtrack of sirens and struggle. When she turned back, her face had changed. Steel, replacing worry. "Show me what's on that drive." They spent the next 4 hours huddled over Madison's laptop, scrolling through files that painted a picture of systematic corruption so deep it took their breath away. Financial records showing millions in embezzled funds, emails between administrators and board members discussing how to silence assault victims, security footage of incidents that had been reported as accidents but were clearly deliberate attacks. And worse, so much worse. "Jesus Christ," Sarah whispered, staring at a folder labeled Conversion Protocols. Inside were documents outlining how Westfield had deliberately failed special needs students to force them out, maintaining their perfect statistics by removing anyone who might lower test scores. "These are children. They're destroying children." Madison clicked on another file. This one, showing correspondence between Dr. Brennan and several pharmaceutical companies. They were getting kickbacks for referring students for ADHD medication. "Look at this. They diagnosed 70% of scholarship students with attention disorders, compared to 8% of legacy students, keeping the poor kids drugged and compliant," Sarah said, her voice bitter. "God, I've seen some of these kids in the ER. Overdoses. Adverse reactions. I thought they were just overprescribed. I didn't realize it was deliberate." A notification popped up on Madison's phone. An unknown number. But the message was clear. "You have 1 hour to delete that video and issue an apology. This is your only warning." Madison screenshotted it and continued scrolling through files. 30 minutes later, another message. "Your mother works at St. Mary's Hospital. Night shift. Gardiats unit. Parking garage level Baytway." Amazing how dangerous those garages can be after dark. Sarah read it over her daughter's shoulder. Instead of fear, her face showed fury. "They're threatening me now? These entitled little..." She caught herself, took a breath. "Forward that to me. I'm sending it to hospital security and the police." "Mom, maybe we should." "Should what? Back down? Let them win?" Sarah pulled her daughter into a fierce hug. "Baby, I've been backing down my whole life. Taking extra shifts instead of filing complaints about discrimination. Smiling when doctors assumed I was janitor instead of a nurse. Keeping quiet when I saw rich patients get better care than poor ones. I'm done being quiet." The doorbell rang at exactly 9 p.m. Through the peephole, Madison saw a man in an expensive suit holding a leather briefcase. She recognized him from Westfield's website, Jonathan Hartwell, the school's chief legal counsel. "Don't open it," Sarah said. "I'm not afraid of him." Madison opened the door but kept the chain on. "Mr. Hartwell, isn't it past your bedtime?" The lawyer's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Miss Hayes, I'm here to discuss a mutually beneficial resolution to today's unfortunate misunderstanding." "Assault, not misunderstanding." "And no, you haven't heard my offer?" "I don't need to. You're here to buy my silence." "The answer is no." Hartwell's smile tightened. "Your scholarship covers tuition. But I understand there are many additional expenses. Books, supplies, college applications. We're prepared to offer a comprehensive package that would cover all educational expenses through graduate school. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, wherever you choose. All expenses paid. Plus a generous living stipend. In exchange for a simple statement clarifying that today's incident was a misguided prank between friends. That no harm was intended, and that the matter has been resolved privately." Madison laughed. "Between friends? Trevor Sinclair and I aren't friends. We've never been friends. And you want me to lie on camera to protect him? Think of your future. Miss Hayes, think of your mother. This offer won't remain available long. Neither will your freedom once the FBI sees what's on the flash drive Catherine Morrison gave me." Madison watched his face carefully and saw the exact moment his composure cracked. "Oh, you didn't know about that? 15 years of financial records. Mr. Hartwell, including your offshore accounts. Did you really think skimming from the endowment fund would go unnoticed forever?" The lawyer stepped back, his face pale. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. These people will destroy you. They can try. Now get off my property before I add trespassing to the list of charges." After Hartwell left, Madison and Sarah worked through the night, organizing files, creating backups, and preparing for war. They uploaded encrypted copies to multiple cloud services, sent files to journalists at major newspapers, and prepared a dead man's switch that would release everything if anything happened to either of them. At 3 a.m., Madison's phone rang. The caller ID showed her chemistry teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez. "Madison?" The teacher's voice was strained. "I'm sorry to call so late, But I thought you should know. There's an emergency board meeting tomorrow morning. They're going to vote on your expulsion. On what grounds? Creating a hostile learning environment, inciting violence, and distributing defamatory content. Mrs. Rodriguez paused. Madison. 6 board members have already signed off. They just need one more vote to make it official. They're moving fast. Let them try. Thank you for the warning. There's more. Trevor's family has hired Burton and Associates. They're the firm that destroyed the Johnson family. They don't just practice law, they practice warfare. Madison felt a chill, but pushed it down. Then it's a good thing I'm not planning to follow the rules of engagement. She hung up and turned to her mother. They're trying to expel me. Over my dead body. Sarah said, we need help. Real help. Madison pulled up a contact she'd saved months ago but never used. Alexandra Chen. The older sister of Ashley Chen, the girl whose assault Westfield had covered up 3 years ago. Alexandra was now a civil rights attorney in New York. And she told Madison to call if she ever needed help. The phone rang twice before a alert voice answered. Alexandra Chen. Miss Chen? This is Madison Hayes from Westfield Academy. You said to call if... I saw the video. I've been waiting for your call. How bad is it? I have 15 years of evidence on a flash drive. Financial crimes. Assault cover-ups. Systematic discrimination. They're trying to expel me tomorrow morning. There was a pause. Then, I can be there by 7 a.m. Don't go to that meeting without me. And Madison, start recording everything. Every conversation. Every interaction. From now on, you're building a federal case. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that should have heralded new beginnings instead of institutional warfare. Madison stood before her bathroom mirror, scissors in hand, and finished what Trevor had started. She cut her hair into a sharp, even bob, 7 taking control of what they'd tried to use against her. If they wanted to make her appearance a battlefield, she'd show them how a real soldier prepared for war. Sarah had called in sick for the first time in 5 years. Standing beside her daughter in her best outfit, the one she wore to court when she'd had to testify about patient care. They arrived at Westfield to find news vans in the parking lot and protesters at the gates holding signs, "Protect students. Not donors, and how many more victims?" Alexandra Chen waited by the entrance. Her power suit and briefcase, a stark contrast to the usual parade of yoga pants and designer casualties. She was everything Madison remembered. Sharp, fierce, and carrying the kind of righteous anger that came from personal experience with injustice. They're going to try to ambush you in there, Alexandra said without preamble. Standard intimidation tactics. Don't speak unless I nod. Record everything. And whatever happens, don't let them see you sweat. The boardroom was a monument to old money and older power. Mahogany panels. Oil paintings of dead white men who'd built their fortunes on others' backs. And a table that could have fed Madison's entire apartment building for a month. The board members were already seated. 7 figures who collectively controlled billions in assets and apparently thought that gave them the right to control children's lives. Richard Sinclair sat at the head of the table, his resemblance to Trevor unmistakable in the cruel set of his mouth and the predatory gleam in his eyes. Beside him sat other familiar faces from society pages and business journals, people who'd never experienced a consequence they couldn't buy their way out of. Miss Hayes, Dr. Branham began, her voice dripping with false concern. We're here to discuss your recent behavior and its impact on our learning environment. Alexandra stood smoothly. Actually, we're here to discuss Westfield Academy's systematic violation of federal education laws, Title IX requirements, and criminal conspiracy to cover up assault. The room erupted. Board members shouted objections, threatened lawsuits, demanded Alexandra be removed. She weathered it all with a smile that promised blood. Furthermore, she continued, raising her voice above the chaos, my client has evidence of financial crimes that fall under RICO statutes, embezzlement, money laundering, tax fraud, all documented, all traceable, all currently being reviewed by the FBI, IRS, and Department of Education. Richard Sinclair slammed his hand on the table. This is extortion. No, Madison said, standing despite Alexandra's warning look. Extortion is threatening my mother's job if I don't stay quiet. Extortion is leveraging donations to cover up crimes. What this is justice. She pulled out her phone and started the recording she'd prepared. Trevor's voice filled the room. Yeah, we're gonna cut that bitch's hair tomorrow. Put her in her place. My dad says she needs to learn that scholarship kids should be grateful, not uppity. Then Blake Morrison, make sure someone films it. We can edit it later. Make it look like she asked for it. Emma Cartwright, my mom says if she complains, we just say she's unstable. Mental health issues. Who's gonna believe trailer trash over us? The board members' faces had gone pale. This wasn't just random cruelty, this was conspiracy. Recorded and undeniable. But wait. Madison said, her voice steady. There's more. She played another recording. This one from the flash drive. Dr. Brennan's voice. Talking to Richard Sinclair. The Johnson family is becoming a problem. They have evidence of the assault. We need to handle this like we did with the Martinez situation. Sinclair's response. I'll make some calls. By next month, they won't be able to afford groceries. Let alone lawyers. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Brennan's face had gone gray, her hands trembling as she realized her career was over. Alexandra stood again. Every person in this room has a choice. Resign immediately and cooperate with authorities. Or be named as defendants in a federal lawsuit that will strip you of everything, your positions, your reputations, your freedom. You can't prove, one board member started. Madison interrupted by projecting files onto the meeting room screen. Financial records, emails, security footage. A systematic pattern of corruption so comprehensive that even she was shocked by its scope. 15 years, she said quietly. 15 years of children hurt, families destroyed, futures stolen. Also, you could maintain your perfect statistics and keep the donations flowing. How many scholarships kids did you drive to suicide? How many assaults did you cover up? How many lives did you ruin because they threatened your image? Richard Sinclair stood slowly, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. You think you've won? You have no idea what I'm capable of. I will. Mr. Sinclair. A new voice interrupted from the doorway. I'm Agent Martinez with the FBI. We'll need you to step away from the table and keep your hands visible. The boardroom filled with federal agents, badges gleaming, warrants in hand. It turned out Alexandra had been busy in the early morning hours, delivering copies of key evidence to authorities who'd been trying to crack Westfield's wall of silence for years. As Richard Sinclair was led away in handcuffs, he turned to Madison with pure hatred in his eyes. This isn't over. Yes. Madison said simply, it is. The next 3 hours were a blur of statements, evidence collection, and watching the mighty fall. Dr. Brennan was arrested on charges of conspiracy and embezzlement. 3 board members were taken into custody. Jonathan Hartwell tried to flee but was apprehended in the parking lot, his briefcase full of shredded documents that IT forensics would painstakingly reassemble. By noon, Westfield Academy was under federal oversight. By evening, the story had gone national. Scholarship student exposes decades of corruption at elite school ran across every major news outlet, accompanied by Madison's school photo, the one where her hair still fell past her shoulders. Before Trevor Sinclair decided to make her a symbol, but the real victory came 3 days later. In a packed courtroom where Trevor Sinclair stood before a judge, no longer smirking, no longer protected by daddy's money. The assault charge was just the beginning. Investigation had revealed a pattern of behavior that included drugging female students at parties, destroying scholarship students' property, and orchestrating systematic harassment campaigns. Mr. Sinclair, the judge said, her voice cutting through his lawyer's objections. You are hereby sentenced to 18 months in juvenile detention, 3 years probation, and mandatory counseling. Furthermore, you are barred from any educational institution that receives federal funding. Trevor's face crumbled. His golden future, the Ivy League acceptance already bought and paid for, the guaranteed position at his father's company, the life of consequence-free privilege, evaporated in an instant. As they led him away, he looked at Madison one last time. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply nodded, then turned and walked out of the courtroom into a future she'd earned through courage instead of inheritance. 6 months later, Madison stood at a podium in Washington, D.C., her hair grown out into a professional style, addressing a congressional hearing on educational equity and institutional accountability. The Hayes Act, as it would come to be known, would require all private schools receiving federal funds to maintain independent oversight boards and transparent reporting of disciplinary actions. They cut my hair, she said, her voice carrying across the chamber, because they thought they could cut me down to size. They thought poverty made me powerless, that needing financial aid meant I should accept abuse with gratitude. They were wrong. She looked directly at the cameras, knowing that somewhere, former Westfield board members were watching from their homes, the ones they'd managed to keep after paying massive settlements. To every student who's been told to be grateful for scraps, who's been punished for excellence, who's been silenced by power, speak up. Record everything. Fight back. The system that protects predators thrives on our silence. Break it. Her phone buzzed with a message from her mother, who was watching from her new position as head nurse at a hospital that valued merit over money. So proud of you, baby. Dad would be too. Madison smiled, touching her hair, now a badge of honor rather than a mark of shame. She'd lost 8 inches of hair but gained something invaluable. proof that even the most powerful institutions could fall when faced with truth, courage, and really good documentation. The war for Westfield's soul was over. Madison Hayes had won, and across the country, in schools where privilege had always trumped justice, administrators were nervously reviewing their policies, knowing that the next Madison Hayes might be sitting in their classrooms right now, taking notes, gathering evidence, and preparing to cut their corruption down to size. 2 years later, Madison Hayes walked across Harvard's graduation stage, her bachelor's degree in political science clutched in steady hands, the same hands that had once trembled with rage as she gathered her butchered hair from a classroom floor, now bore the calluses of 1,000 fights for justice. In the audience,